I sent my wedding invitation 6 months in advance. 2 weeks later, my younger sister Brittany announced her engagement party on the exact same day at the exact same time. Not a single person from my family came to my wedding. As I stood in the empty church, my mother texted me 2 words: "Call me. Urgent." I looked at the message and smiled because I knew the war had finally begun. My name is Audrey. At 34 years old, I stood in a hand-stitched lace gown that cost more than my first car, looking out at 50 empty mahogany pews. The historic Boston Cathedral was silent, except for the nervous shifting of the priest and the steady breathing of Liam, my fiancé, who held my hand so tight his knuckles were white. The only guests were 2 of Liam's colleagues and my college roommate. My parents, my aunts, my uncles, and even my cousins were all missing. They had chosen Brittany. My thigh buzzed. I had hidden my phone in the pocket of my dress for emergencies. I pulled it out. A notification from Instagram flashed on the screen. Brittany was live. Against my better judgment, I tapped the screen. The video loaded instantly, showing the crystal chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom just 5 miles away. The noise was deafening, laughter, clinking glasses, and jazz music. The camera panned to show my mother, Patricia, holding a microphone. Her voice was crystal clear. "We are so proud to celebrate the only daughter who truly understands family values," my mother said, raising a glass. My chest tightened, but not from sadness, from rage. The camera swung to Brittany. She was laughing, her head thrown back in fake delight, clinging to the arm of Jamal, her billionaire tech fiancé. But it was not her smile that made my blood turn to ice. It was what glittered at her throat. A deep blue teardrop stone surrounded by diamonds suspended on a platinum chain. The Rosemont sapphire. My grandmother left that necklace in her will with one specific condition. It belongs to the first granddaughter to walk down the aisle in holy matrimony. That was me. Today. Right now. Brittany had not just stolen my guests. She had broken into my grandmother's safe deposit box and stolen my $2 million inheritance to wear as a costume prop. Before I tell you how I turned this humiliation into a lawsuit that shook Boston society, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. If you have ever had a toxic family member try to erase your happiness, let me know in the comments below. I stared at the screen. Brittany waved at the camera, the sapphire catching the light. She thought she had won. She thought I was crying in a corner. She had no idea that she had just provided me with video evidence of grand larceny. I looked up at Liam and the priest. I did not shed a tear. I simply put the phone away and said, "Let us get married. I have a party to crash." The silence in the cathedral was heavy after I lowered my phone. Father Thomas cleared his throat and looked at the empty pews, then at me with pity in his eyes. He adjusted his collar nervously. "Perhaps we should reschedule," he suggested, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "I suspect this is not the celebration you envisioned, Audrey. We can wait until your family is available." I turned to Liam. His jaw was clenched tight, and his eyes were dark with a protective fury I had rarely seen. He was ready to storm out of the church and drag my family here by their hair. He knew exactly where they were and what they were doing. But I squeezed his hand, forcing him to look at me. "No," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "We are not rescheduling. We are not hiding." I looked the priest in the eye. "Marry us, Father, right now." The ceremony was stripped of all pomp and circumstance. There was no organ music, no flower girls, no walking down the aisle. I looked like a woman who was done being the victim. My phone buzzed against the marble table. Another notification. It was my mother, Patricia, again. 2 words flashed on the screen. "Call me," followed immediately by another text. "Urgent. Come home now." I stared at the screen and let out a dry laugh. She did not care that she missed her eldest daughter's wedding. She did not care if I was hurt. She only cared that I held the authentication papers for the necklace Brittany was currently parading around. Jamal would be asking for them soon, and my mother was panicking. Liam leaned against the doorframe watching me transform. He checked his watch. I suppose the flight to Hawaii is on hold, he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes dancing with a dangerous excitement. He knew me better than anyone. Indefinitely, I replied, picking up my clutch, which contained the one document that could destroy Brittany's perfect night. I walked past him and pushed open the heavy oak doors to the bright afternoon sun. Get the car, Liam. I have a debt to collect, and I intend to collect it in person. The valet at the Ritz-Carlton looked confused when I stepped out of the car. I was not wearing a ball gown like the other guests arriving for the engagement party, nor was I wearing the traditional wedding dress one would expect from a bride on her wedding day. My white tailored suit was sharp enough to cut glass. Liam stood beside me adjusting his cufflinks. He offered me his arm not as a prop, but as an anchor. I took it, and we walked toward the massive gilded doors that separated my quiet dignity from their loud betrayal. The ballroom was suffocatingly opulent. Towers of champagne glasses shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh lilies. Hundreds of guests were mingling. These were my relatives, my neighbors, the people who had RSVP'd to my wedding months ago, yet here they were sipping cocktails on my parents' tab. The jazz band was playing a lively tune, but the moment the heavy doors swung shut behind me, the atmosphere shifted, heads turned. The murmurs started like a ripple in a pond. They recognized me. They recognized the woman who was supposed to be walking down an aisle right now. But I kept my chin high, and my eyes locked on the stage at the center of the room. Brittany was standing there bathing in the spotlight. She looked undeniable with the Rosemont sapphire glittering at her throat, stealing the attention from everything else in the room, including her own engagement ring. She saw me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before twisting into something malicious. She tapped the microphone and the feedback screeched through the speakers, silencing the band. "Oh, look, everyone," Brittany announced, her voice dripping with mock sympathy that echoed off the high ceilings. "Get out right now before you ruin your sister's moment. Jamal is watching. The investors are watching. If you make a scene, I swear I will cut you off completely." I looked down at her hand gripping my white blazer. Her knuckles were white. She was terrified. Not for me. Not for the daughter she had abandoned on her wedding day. She was terrified for the image she had carefully constructed. She thought she could bully me into submission like she had done for 34 years. She thought I was the same Audrey who begged for approval. She was wrong. I slowly peeled her fingers off my arm one by one. I leaned in close so only she could hear me over the resumed jazz music. "I am not here to make a scene, Mother. I am here to make an arrest. And I suggest you get out of my way unless you want to be named as an accomplice." I did not shove my mother. I simply stepped around her as if she were a piece of furniture that had been placed inconveniently in a hallway. Her threats faded into the background noise of the party as I fixed my gaze on the stage. The distance between the pillar and the podium was only 30 feet, but it felt like walking a tightrope. Every eye in the room was fixed on the back of my white blazer. I could feel their judgment and their curiosity burning into me, but I did not falter. I ascended the 3 small steps to the stage. The jazz band stopped playing completely, leaving a silence so thick it was almost suffocating. Brittany took a step back, clutching Jamal's arm so tightly her fingernails must have dug into his expensive suit jacket. Her face was pale beneath her heavy makeup. She looked like a child caught with her hand in a cookie jar, but the cookie was a $2 million heirloom. Jamal, however, did not step back. He stood his ground. He was a man who had built a tech unicorn from a garage startup. He was used to hostile takeovers and boardroom confrontations. He looked at me with narrowed, calculating eyes, assessing the threat level. He saw the structural suit, the red lipstick, and the folder in my hand. He realized immediately that this was not a social call. I stopped 2 feet away from them. I did not look at my sister. I looked directly at him. "Hello, Jamal," I said, my voice steady and loud enough to be heard by the front row of investors. "Congratulations on your engagement. I apologize for the interruption, but I am here to retrieve something that belongs to me." Brittany snapped. She lunged forward, grabbing the microphone stand. "Security!" she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Get her out of here! She is crazy! She is jealous because no one went to her wedding, so she wants to ruin mine. Throw her out right now." Two large men in black suits began to move toward the stage from the side entrance. The guests gasped, anticipating a physical altercation. My mother was shouting something from the floor. The chaos was building exactly as Brittany wanted. She wanted a scene that would paint me as the unstable older sister, but I did not move. I did not flinch. I held Jamal's gaze. Jamal looked at the approaching security guards, then back at me. He looked at the calm determination in my eyes, and then at the frantic, sweating mess that was his fiancée. He was a businessman. He knew that crazy people screamed and cried. People with leverage stood still. "Wait," Jamal said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of authority. He held up a hand, and the security guards froze in their tracks. Brittany looked at him in shock. "Baby, what are you doing?" she whined, pulling on his sleeve. "She is humiliating us. Just kick her out." Jamal pulled his arm away from her grip. He adjusted his cufflinks and took a step toward me. "You are the accountant, right?" "The sister, Audrey." He looked me up and down. "You do not look like a crazy person, Audrey. You look like someone who came here to do business. So tell me, before I let security drag you out, what exactly do you think belongs to you?" I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled since I saw the empty church pews. I lifted the folder. "I am glad you asked, Jamal, because I assume a man of your status cares about the provenance of his assets." I pointed a manicured finger at the blue stone pulsing at Brittany's throat. "That necklace is not a gift from our grandmother. It is stolen property. And I have the police report to prove it." The room was so quiet that the sound of Jamal opening the manila folder sounded like a gunshot. Brittany tried to snatch it from his hands, but he blocked her with his elbow without even looking at her. His eyes were glued to the document I had handed him. He was expecting a handwritten letter from a dead grandmother, or perhaps a contested will. He was not expecting the official seal of the Boston Police Department. "What is this?" Jamal asked, his voice low and dangerous. He looked up from the paper, his brow furrowed in confusion. "This is a police report. Why are you showing me a police report filed 2 hours ago?" I took a step closer, ensuring my voice carried to the investors standing near the stage. "Because, Jamal, that necklace around your fiancé's neck is not a family heirloom she inherited. It is stolen property. And in the state of Massachusetts, theft of property valued over $1,200 is considered grand larceny. That necklace is valued at $2 million. That makes this a felony." Brittany let out a screech of laughter that sounded bordering on manic. "You are lying!" she shouted, her hands flying up to cover the sapphire as if she could hide it. "Grandma gave this to me. She told me I could wear it for my engagement. You are just jealous because you are a miserable spinster." I did not even look at her. I kept my eyes on Jamal. Grandmother's will was very specific. The Rosemont sapphire belongs to the first granddaughter to be legally married. I pulled a second piece of paper from my pocket. It was my marriage certificate, signed and time-stamped at 2 o'clock this afternoon. "I married Liam 2 hours ago," I explained calmly. "The moment the priest signed this paper, legal ownership of that necklace transferred to me. According to the security logs at the bank, Brittany accessed the safe deposit box at 3 o'clock. She did not borrow it. She took it. And since I did not give permission, that is theft." The color drained from Jamal's face. He looked at the marriage license, then at the police report, then at the necklace. He was doing the math. He was realizing that his engagement party was effectively a crime scene. I checked my watch. I filed the report exactly 45 minutes ago. I told the officers I knew exactly where the stolen goods were located. They are likely pulling up to the valet stand right now. I tilted my head, looking at Brittany, who was now trembling. "So, Jamal, I have a question for you. Do you want your investors to watch your bride get handcuffed on stage, or would you prefer to hand over the evidence voluntarily before the officers enter the ballroom?" "My mother." Patricia gasped loudly, clutching her chest. You called the police on your own sister, she shrieked. You are a monster. I am not a monster. Mother, I replied, cold as ice. I am a citizen reporting a crime. And you might want to be careful. The police report also lists an accomplice who provided the key to the safe deposit box. I believe that was you. Jamal stepped back from Brittany as if she were radioactive. He looked at the woman he was about to marry with a mixture of horror and disgust. He did not care about the family drama. He cared that he was standing next to a felon. He turned to Brittany, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Take it off! Take it off right now! The ballroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop, or in this case a diamond necklace hitting the floor. Brittany was unraveling before our eyes. Her hands flew to her neck, clawing at the platinum clasp with manic desperation. She was hyperventilating, her chest heaving up and down. She looked like a trapped animal, realizing the cage door had just slammed shut. I do not want it, she screamed, tearing at the metal. Take it back. I do not care. She finally managed to undo the latch and raised her arm, preparing to hurl the $2 million heirloom across the room, perhaps into the chocolate fountain, or simply into the crowd to destroy the evidence. Stop it, my mother. Patricia lunged forward, catching Brittany's wrist in midair. She gripped her daughter's arm with bruising force, her nails digging into the skin. Do not you dare throw that away, Brittany. Put it back on. Brittany looked at our mother with wide, terrified eyes. But the police, she whimpered. Audrey said the police are coming. I do not want to go to jail, Mom. You are not going to jail. Patricia hissed, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. She turned to Jamal and the silent crowd, her face twisting into a mask of righteous indignation. This is a misunderstanding. My mother gave that necklace to Brittany. I was there. It was a deathbed gift. She said Brittany should have it because she was the light of this family. Audrey is lying. She is just jealous that Grandma loved Brittany more. A murmur went through the crowd. My mother was a convincing actress. She looked straight at me with a challenge in her eyes, daring me to call her a liar without proof. She thought it was her word against mine. She thought she could rewrite history because the only person who could contradict her was 6 feet under. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my phone. I anticipated you would say that, Mother. You always did rely on the dead being unable to speak. I tapped the screen, opening my cloud storage. Thankfully, Grandma knew exactly who you were. She recorded her final wishes specifically to prevent this exact moment. I connected my phone to the Bluetooth system of the nearest speaker. The feedback whined for a second, and then a voice filled the room. It was raspy and weak, but unmistakably my grandmother Rosemont. My dearest Audrey. The recording played, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. I am leaving the sapphire to you. You are the strong one. You are the one who will carry this family's legacy with honor. Do not let your mother take it. Do not let Brittany touch it. It belongs to the first bride. It belongs to you. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My mother's face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. The lie had not just been exposed, it had been obliterated by the voice of the woman she claimed to honor. I tapped the screen to stop the recording. I looked at Jamal, who was staring at my mother with a look of absolute horror. He realized he was not just marrying a thief, but marrying into a family of pathological liars. Grandma died 2 hours after recording that, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. She was not confused, Mother. She was protecting her assets from the people she knew would try to steal them. Brittany let out a sob, and the necklace slipped from her limp fingers. It did not fly across the room. It simply fell, landing on the stage floor with a heavy, expensive thud right at Jamal's feet. The heavy thud of the sapphire hitting the stage floor was immediately punctuated by the sound of the double doors swinging open. 2 uniformed officers from the Boston Police Department marched into the ballroom. The sudden appearance of law enforcement in a room filled with silk gowns and tuxedos created a jarring visual contrast that silenced even the most oblivious guests. Officer Miller, whom I had spoken to earlier, stepped up to the stage. He did not look at the investors or the champagne towers. He looked directly at the platinum necklace lying at Jamal's feet. "Is this the item reported stolen, ma'am?" he asked, looking at me. I nodded calmly. "Yes, officer. That is the Rosemont sapphire." Brittany let out a strangled cry. "No, wait, please. It was just a misunderstanding. I was just borrowing it. You cannot arrest me for borrowing jewelry from my own grandmother." Officer Miller pulled out a pair of latex gloves. He bent down and picked up the necklace, sealing it into a plastic evidence bag. The sound of the Ziploc closing echoed through the room like a gavel strike. "Ma'am, we have a sworn statement that you removed this item from a secure box without authorization. Unless the owner wishes to drop charges, this is now evidence in an active investigation." He looked at me. I looked at my sister, who was trembling, her mascara running down her cheeks. I looked at my mother, who was pale as a ghost. "I do not wish to drop charges," I said clearly. The room erupted into chaos. Waiters stopped serving. Guests were openly holding up their phones, recording the humiliation. The illusion of the perfect family, the perfect engagement, and the perfect life Brittany had curated for social media was shattering in real time. Jamal stepped forward. He did not reach for Brittany. He reached for the microphone. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his voice remained steady. He was doing damage control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice booming over the whispers, "I apologize for this unfortunate interruption. Please continue to enjoy the food and drink. We will resolve this matter privately." He signaled to the band to play, but the atmosphere was dead. No one was dancing. They were watching Jamal turn to Brittany. He did not hug her. He did not comfort her. He looked at her with narrow, calculating eyes. It was the look of a man wondering what else she had lied about. He looked at her not as his beloved fiancée, but as a liability. Officer Miller handed me a clipboard. I signed the property recovery form. "Thank you, officer," I said. "I will be in touch regarding the court date." I took Liam's arm and turned my back on the stage. We walked back down the aisle, the crowd parting for us with a mixture of fear and awe. My mother tried to grab my arm again as I passed, but I simply held up the evidence bag. She froze. As we stepped out into the cool Boston night, the valet brought our car around. I sat in the passenger seat and placed the plastic bag on my lap. The sapphire glinted under the streetlights. "Did you see his face?" Liam asked, starting the engine. "Jamal." I nodded as I watched the hotel entrance in the side mirror. "I saw it. He is wondering who he really proposed to." I leaned back and closed my eyes. The battle for the necklace was won, but the war for the truth was just beginning. Brittany was down, but she was not out. And tomorrow, when my father found out I had humiliated his golden child in front of Boston's elite, the real retaliation would begin. I smiled. Let them come. I was ready. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my office on the 45th floor of the Prudential Tower. The view of the Boston skyline was commanding, but my father Richard did not notice it when he stormed past my executive assistant. He did not knock. He slammed the heavy glass door open and marched straight to my mahogany desk, his face flushed with a mixture of hangover and rage. "You have lost your mind, Audrey," he shouted, throwing his leather gloves onto a stack of case files. "I just got off the phone with Jamal. He is threatening to call off the engagement unless we fix this mess. You are going to the police station right now and you are going to tell them it was a mistake. You will tell them you gave Brittany that necklace." I did not look up from the tablet I was reviewing. I took a sip of my black coffee and swiped to the next page of the spreadsheet. "Good morning to you too, Richard. I see you managed to find my address. It is funny how you could not find the church address yesterday." "Do not get smart with me," he snapped, leaning over my desk, invading my personal space. "I know you are bitter. I know you are jealous that your sister bagged a billionaire while you are sitting here pushing pencils for some no-name accounting firm, but you will not ruin this family's financial future because of a temper tantrum. Drop the charges or I will make sure you never work in this town again." I finally set the tablet down and looked at him. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. He looked like a man desperate to keep his house of cards from falling over. "You think I push pencils?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "You think I file tax returns for small businesses?" "I do not care what you do," he spat. "You are a low-level bookkeeper, Audrey. You always have been. Now pick up the phone." Before I could respond, the door opened again. This time there was a polite knock before a man in a sharp navy suit stepped in. It was Marcus, my senior analyst. He was holding a thick red folder stamped with the words, "Confidential and Federal." "Apologies for the interruption, Director," he said, ignoring my father completely. "The forensic analysis on the XYZ Corporation tax fraud investigation is complete. We found the shell companies in the Cayman Islands just like you suspected. The FBI liaison is waiting in conference room B for your signature to authorize the asset seizure." My father froze. The color drained from his face faster than it had the night before. He looked at Marcus, then back at me. He looked at the plaque on my desk that he had been too angry to read earlier. It did not say Audrey Miller, accountant. It said Audrey Miller, Senior Director of Forensic Auditing. "Director," he whispered. His voice trembled. "You work with the FBI." I took the red folder from Marcus and uncapped my fountain pen. "Thank you, Marcus. Tell the agents I will be there in 2 minutes. And please call security. I have an intruder in my office who is refusing to leave." Marcus nodded and stepped out, closing the door softly. I signed the federal warrant authorization and looked up at my father. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a dawn of terrifying realization. He was not looking at his daughter, the pencil pusher, anymore. He was looking at a woman who hunted financial criminals for a living, and he knew exactly what kind of financial secrets he had been hiding in the family company accounts. "I am not a bookkeeper, Richard," I said, closing the folder with a sharp snap. "I am the person they call when they want to find the money people like you try to hide. Now get out of my office before I decide to bring my work home with me." My father stood frozen in the center of my office. For a moment I thought he might actually have a stroke. His face went from a shade of angry crimson to a terrifyingly pale gray. He looked at the closed door where the FBI liaison was waiting, then back at me. He tried to muster some of his old authority, some of the bluster he had used to control me since I was a child, but his voice wavered. "You are bluffing, Audrey," he said, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. "You are just an accountant. You do not have access to my company records. You are trying to scare me into respecting you." I did not yell. I did not even raise my voice. I simply walked around my desk, closing the distance between us until I was standing right in front of him. I could smell the stale scotch on his breath beneath the mints he used to hide it. I looked him dead in the eye and dropped my voice to a whisper so quiet he had to lean in to hear me. "I do not need access to your books to know how math works, Richard. I know that the family construction business has not turned a profit in 3 years yet. Brittany just bought a Porsche and you just renovated the summer house. I know about the sudden series of cash withdrawals from the employee pension fund structured specifically to be under $10,000 to avoid triggering a federal report. That is called structuring, Dad, and it is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison." He flinched as if I had slapped him. His eyes darted around the room as if looking for hidden microphones. I leaned closer, my voice turning into pure ice. "I know you are draining the retirement savings of men who have worked for you for 30 years just to pay off Brittany's gambling debts in Atlantic City. I know she owes the casinos nearly $200,000. And I know you are terrified that Jamal will find out his perfect fiancé is a degenerate gambler, so you are stealing to cover her tracks." My father opened his mouth to deny it, but no sound came out. He realized then that I was not guessing. I had seen the patterns. I lived in the data. "So, here's the deal," I continued, stepping back and crossing my arms. "You are going to turn around and walk out of my office. You are going to tell Brittany that she is on her own regarding the stolen necklace. And if you ever storm into my workplace again or threaten me, I will consider it an invitation to officially audit your personal tax returns. And trust me, Richard, when I start digging, I do not stop until I find every single penny." Do you really want the FBI agent down the hall to see what I see? He looked at me with a mixture of fear and hatred. He realized he had lost. The daughter he thought was a useless scapegoat held his freedom in her hands. He did not say another word. He grabbed his gloves from my desk, his hands shaking visibly. When I arrived, the maitre d' ushered me immediately to a secluded booth in the back. Jamal was already there. He was not drinking alcohol. He had a glass of sparkling water in front of him, and he was staring at the bubbles rising to the surface with an intensity that suggested he was trying to solve a complex equation in his head. He looked up as I slid into the leather banquette opposite him. He looked tired. The confident tech mogul from the engagement party was replaced by a man who realized he had been sleeping next to a stranger. I did not come here to listen to you bash your sister, Jamal said quietly, before I could even order a drink. I do not care about childhood rivalries, or who mom loved more. I want to know if I'm marrying a fraud. I placed my clutch on the table and folded my hands. I appreciate your directness, Jamal. And you should know that I do not deal in gossip. I am an auditor. I deal in data. I deal in verifiable facts. I am not here to tell you Brittany is a bad person. I am here to show you that she is a financial liability. I slid the beige folder across the polished mahogany table. Jamal looked at it for a moment, hesitating. He knew that whatever was inside that folder would be the point of no return. He reached out and flipped it open. The first page was a summary of Brittany's FICO credit score. In the United States, a score below 600 is considered poor. Brittany's score was 420. It was a number usually associated with bankruptcy and foreclosure. Jamal's eyes widened. He turned the page. What you are looking at is a comprehensive credit report, I explained, keeping my voice neutral. Brittany has 7 maxed-out credit cards. She has a personal loan with an interest rate of 25% that she used to pay for the down payment on her Porsche. She told you she owned that car outright, did not she? Jamal did not answer. Finding out his fiancée was financially illiterate and deceitful was worse than finding out she had cheated. Keep the file, I said, standing up. I have a meeting to get to. Do with that information what you will. But if I were you, I would check your own bank statements. If she stole a necklace from her own grandmother, she certainly would not hesitate to borrow a credit card from her future husband. I walked away, leaving him alone in the dim light of the club. I did not need to look back to know that he was already pulling out his phone, logging into his banking app, his fingers flying across the screen in a panic. The seed of doubt had not just been planted, it had bloomed into a full-blown crisis. The folder lay open on the mahogany table like an autopsy report of a relationship that was dead on arrival. Jamal stared at the line items highlighted in yellow. He was a man who scrutinized balance sheets for billion-dollar tech acquisitions, yet he had never thought to perform due diligence on the woman sleeping in his bed. The numbers were staggering. $500,000 in consumer debt. He ran his finger down the list. $80,000 to a plastic surgeon in Miami for a body sculpting procedure she had claimed was a medically necessary corrective surgery. $45,000 at Saks Fifth Avenue in a single month. $12,000 for a week at a wellness retreat in Sedona while she told him she was visiting a sick relative. It was not just the money. Jamal could write a check for $500,000 without blinking. It was the deception. It was the sheer entitlement. He had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Detroit. He had coded his first app on a refurbished laptop while working night shifts at a warehouse. He respected hustle. He respected ambition. What he was looking at now was a parasite. He turned to the final section of the report. Audrey had included transcripts of recovered text messages between Brittany and her best friend. The timestamp was from 3 months ago, right before Jamal had proposed. One message stood out, making Jamal's blood run cold. Brittany had written simply, "I just need to hold it together until the wedding day. Once I get that ring on my finger, his money is legally marital property. He can pay off the Amex and I can finally quit pretending to like his boring tech friends." Jamal closed the folder. The leather cover made a soft thud. He sat back and looked around the quiet club. He felt like a fool. He had thought he was marrying a woman who loved him for his mind and his drive. Instead, he was just a glorified ATM machine to a woman who viewed him with contempt. He signaled the waiter for the check. He did not order a drink. He needed a clear head. He took out his phone and opened his banking app. He saw the joint account he had opened for wedding expenses. He saw the transfer pending for the venue deposit. He canceled it immediately. He was not going to confront her yet. That would be too easy. He was a strategist. If Brittany wanted to play games with his money, he would show her exactly how the game was played when you were the one holding the bankroll. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. The engagement was over, but the lesson was just beginning. He walked out of the Oak Room not as a fiancé, but as a CEO, preparing for a hostile restructuring. Brittany wanted a lifestyle she could not afford. He decided right then and there that the only thing she was going to get from him was a harsh introduction to reality. The atmosphere in my parents' house that evening was toxic enough to kill a houseplant. Jamal arrived with the intention of ending the engagement. He had his speech prepared. He was going to cite the financial deception, the credit card debt, and the theft of the heirlooms. He was ready to walk away and cut his losses. But Brittany is a predator who has honed her survival instincts over decades of manipulating everyone around her. She sensed the danger the moment he walked through the door. Before Jamal could even utter the words "strictly business," Brittany collapsed onto the sofa in a heap of tears. She did not cry about the debt. She did not cry about the necklace. She placed a hand protectively over her flat stomach and looked up at him with wide, trembling eyes. She told him that the stress was hurting the baby. The word hung in the air like a spell. Baby. My mother, Patricia, immediately sprang into action. She did not ask for proof. She did not ask how far along she was, or why Brittany had been drinking champagne just the night before. She simply shrieked with delight and pulled Brittany into a crushing embrace. "A grandchild," she screamed. "We are going to have a grandbaby. Richard, get the expensive sparkling cider." Jamal froze. He was a man of honor. He had been raised in a community where family was everything, and he believed that a father protects his children above all else. The anger that had been fueling him just seconds ago was suddenly doused by a cold bucket of responsibility. He looked at Brittany, who was now smiling weakly through her tears, accepting the adoration of our parents. They were already talking about names. They were talking about nursery colors. They were insulating her with a layer of excitement that Jamal could not penetrate without looking like a monster. He could not break up with a pregnant woman. He could not evict the mother of his child. The trap had snapped shut. My phone lit up an hour later with a picture in the family group chat that I had not yet blocked. It was a photo of Brittany and Jamal. He looked shell-shocked, his hand resting stiffly on her shoulder. The caption read, "Our little miracle arriving soon. Daddy is so happy." I zoomed in on Jamal's eyes. He did not look happy. He looked like a hostage. Brittany had bought herself time. She thought a baby would solve her financial ruin. She thought it was a get-out-of-jail-free card that would force Jamal to pay her debts to secure the family's future. But she forgot one thing. Jamal was a man of logic. He would stay for the child, but the blind love was gone. He was no longer looking at her as a partner. He was looking at her as a liability that carried his DNA. I knew that eventually he would demand medical proof. And knowing my sister, I knew that proof would be hard to come by. She had won the battle, but she had just raised the stakes of the war to a dangerous new level. The phone call came 2 days later while I was reviewing the quarterly audit reports. It was my mother, Patricia. She did not bother with pleasantries or apologies for the scene at the engagement party. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone she reserved exclusively for when she wanted something expensive. "Audrey, darling," she began, "we need to talk about living arrangements. Brittany is under so much stress right now with the baby coming. The doctor said she needs absolute tranquility. Her current apartment is too noisy, and frankly, the energy is all wrong for a developing fetus." I leaned back in my chair, putting the call on speaker. "And what do you suggest she do, Mother? Move to the countryside?" "No." Patricia laughed dismissively. She needs to be close to the best hospitals. We were discussing it as a family, and we decided that your condo in Beacon Hill is perfect. It has that nursery room with the southern exposure, and the elevator is private. It is exactly what the baby needs. Since you are just one person, and you work all the time anyway, you can move into the guest cottage at our house. It would be a lovely gesture for you to sign the deed over to your sister. A push present, if you will. I almost choked on my coffee. My grandmother had left me that apartment specifically because she knew my mother would never give me a safe place to call home. It was prime Boston real estate worth $3 million. And she wanted me to gift it to a woman who was faking a pregnancy to avoid paying her debts. Absolutely not, I said, my voice flat. That apartment is my home. Brittany can rent a place like everyone else. There was a pause on the other end. Then the syrup vanished, replaced by the familiar venom. You are selfish, Audrey. You always have been. You would rather sit alone in that big, empty house than help your own flesh and blood. If Brittany loses this baby because of stress, it will be on your hands. You will be a murderer. I hung up. I did not have the energy to argue with a narcissist, but I underestimated the depths to which Patricia would sink to protect her golden child's narrative. 20 minutes later, my phone began to blow up. Notifications from Facebook and Instagram flooded my screen. I opened the app to find a long, tearful post on my mother's timeline, tagging half of Boston society, including Jamal's mother. It breaks my heart, Patricia had written below a photo of a crying Brittany holding a positive pregnancy test. To think that a sister could be so cruel. Audrey has refused to help Brittany find a safe home for her high-risk pregnancy. It is devastating to see such jealousy destroy a family. Please pray for my grandbaby as we try to navigate this toxic environment caused by my eldest daughter. The comments were pouring in. Strangers were calling me an evil aunt. Relatives who had not spoken to me in years were leaving angry face emojis calling me heartless. My mother had successfully weaponized her victimhood. She was painting me as the villain who wanted her grandchild to die. I did not comment. I did not defend myself. I simply took screenshots of every post, every lie, and every defamatory comment. I added them to a new folder on my secure server labeled Defamation Lawsuit. My mother thought she was winning the court of public opinion. She did not realize she was just handing me more ammunition for the real court. 3 days before Thanksgiving, a heavy cream-colored envelope arrived at my penthouse door. Inside was a handwritten invitation from my mother. It was written in her elegant cursive on thick cardstock, as if she had not spent the last week destroying my reputation on social media. It read simply, "Dearest Audrey and Liam, please join us for a family Thanksgiving. Let us put the past behind us and focus on the future of our growing family. Love, Mom and Dad." I tossed the card onto the marble kitchen island with a scoff. It landed next to the tablet that was still displaying the latest hate comments on her Facebook page. "I am not going," I told Liam, who was pouring coffee. "They just accused me of trying to induce a miscarriage. Now they want me to pass the cranberry sauce. It is a trap. They probably have a notary waiting in the dining room to force me to sign the deed to the condo." Liam picked up the invitation and studied it. He was a neurosurgeon. He was used to high-pressure situations and complex problems. He looked at the card not as a peace offering, but as a symptom of a larger pathology. "We have to go, Audrey," he said calmly. I looked at him as if he had grown 2 heads. Why would we possibly subject ourselves to that? "Because if we do not go, they will spin the narrative that you are the one refusing to reconcile," Liam explained. "They will say they extended an olive branch and you snapped it. But more importantly, we need to know what their next move is. Desperate people make mistakes, Audrey, and your parents are desperate. If they are inviting us into their home, it means they have a plan. We need to see it before they execute it." He was right. I hated it, but he was right. I took a deep breath and walked into my home office. If I was going into the lion's den, I was not going in unarmed. I opened my equipment safe. I bypassed the standard voice recorders. I needed something more discreet and more comprehensive. I pulled out a small velvet box containing a set of black pearl buttons. They were custom-made for undercover corporate espionage. The top button contained a 4K wide-angle lens and a high-fidelity microphone. I spent the next hour sewing the buttons onto my black silk blouse. I synced the feed to a secure cloud server and to Liam's phone. Testing 1, 2, 3, I said, tapping the top button. Liam looked at his phone screen. Crystal clear video and audio, he confirmed. I will keep the backup recording running on my device the entire time. We drove to my childhood home in silence. The house loomed at the end of the driveway, a sprawling brick mansion that looked picture-perfect from the outside. It was the house where I had learned to be invisible. It was the house where I had learned that love was conditional. When my father Richard opened the door, he was wearing a cashmere sweater and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Audrey, Liam, so glad you could make it," he boomed, ushering us inside. The house smelled of roasted turkey and expensive candles. In the living room, my mother was sitting next to Brittany, who was resting on the chaise lounge, with a blanket over her legs, looking like a tragic heroine from a Victorian novel. "Audrey," my mother exclaimed, standing up and coming in for a hug. I stiffened, but let her embrace me. She smelled of gin and denial. "I am so glad you decided to be the bigger person and come. We just want everyone to get along for the baby's sake." I pulled back and smiled a smile that was as sharp as a razor blade. I touched the pearl button at my throat, ensuring the lens had a perfect view of her face. "Of course, Mother," I said. "I would not miss it for the world." The dinner conversation was agonizingly polite. My father Richard was droning on about interest rates while Brittany checked her reflection in her spoon every 30 seconds. Liam squeezed my knee under the table, offering silent support. The first course was supposed to be my mother's signature pumpkin bisque. "I will go help Mom with the soup," I announced, standing up. Before anyone could protest, I slipped into the hallway. I did not enter the kitchen immediately. I paused in the butler's pantry, peering through the crack in the swinging door. My mother Patricia was standing at the granite island. Her back was to me. She had lined up 5 bowls of steaming orange soup, but she was not garnishing them with parsley. She was holding a small, unmarked glass vial. I adjusted my collar, ensuring the pearl camera button had a clear line of sight. I watched in high-definition silence as she uncapped the vial and poured a thick, clear liquid into the bowl on the far left. It was not seasoning. Not. "I am just getting some water," I replied, walking to the fridge. My back was to her, but I watched her reflection in the stainless steel appliance. She picked up the breadbasket and bustled out to the dining room, eager to set the stage for her cruel prank. The moment the door swung shut behind her, I moved with the speed of a magician. I looked at the tray. The poisoned bowl was on the left, intended for Liam's seat at the head of the table. The bowl next to it was for my father. I did not hesitate. I switched the bowls. I placed the tainted soup in the spot designated for Richard. I placed the safe soup in the spot for Liam. It took less than 3 seconds. I leaned down to my collar. "I hope you got that, Liam," I whispered. "Do not eat the bread, but enjoy the soup." When my mother returned, I was leaning against the counter, sipping water innocently. She looked at the tray, then at me, searching for any sign that I knew. I gave her nothing but a blank smile. "Let us eat," I said, picking up the tray. "I will serve Dad. You serve Liam." We walked back into the dining room. I placed the bowl in front of my father. He looked up and smiled, oblivious to the biological weapon ticking in his dinner. My mother placed the safe bowl in front of Liam, her eyes dancing with anticipation. "Bon appetit, everyone," Patricia said, unfolding her napkin. I watched my father take the first spoonful. "It is excellent, Patricia," he said, swallowing the poison. "Simply excellent." I took a sip of my wine and hid my smile behind the glass. "Yes, Dad. I have a feeling this is going to be a meal you will never forget." The meal proceeded, and my father Richard was enjoying himself immensely. He had finished every drop of the soup and was now dissecting the turkey with the enthusiasm of a man who believed he had won. 10 minutes into the main course, he tapped his crystal wineglass with a silver fork. The sharp ring silenced the room. He stood up holding his glass high, his face flushed with the false warmth of alcohol and the satisfaction of his own perceived cleverness. "I would like to propose a toast," Richard announced, looking directly at me with a sneer. "To Brittany and Jamal and their upcoming bundle of joy. And to Audrey for finally putting aside her petty jealousy to join us. It takes a big person to admit when they are defeated and accept their role in the family hierarchy." He took a sip of wine. Then it happened. A low, ominous rumble echoed through the dining room. It was loud enough to be heard over the soft jazz playing in the background. My father froze. His eyes bulged. The smirk vanished from his face, replaced by a look of absolute terror. He dropped his wine glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, sending red wine splashing onto the white tablecloth, but nobody paid attention to the broken glass. Because a second later, a much worse sound followed. It was the wet, explosive sound of a digestive system in total revolt. The potent laxative my mother had intended for Liam had worked with terrifying speed and efficiency. My father clutched his stomach and doubled over trying to clinch his muscles, but it was too late. The dam had broken. "Oh God," Richard gasped. The stench hit us instantly. It was vile and overwhelming, filling the elegant dining room like a toxic fog. My father stood there paralyzed in a puddle of his own, making his expensive beige cashmere trousers rapidly turning a dark, humiliating brown. "Oh my God," Brittany screamed. She covered her nose and mouth, her eyes watering. She looked at our father, who was groaning in agony and shame. The sight and the smell were too much for her delicate sensibilities. She gagged violently and then vomited all over the floral centerpiece, splashing bile onto the roast turkey. My mother Patricia stood up, knocking her chair over. My mother had tried to poison my husband. That was a declaration of war that required a nuclear response. I opened a terminal window on my laptop. Most people forgot that before I became a forensic auditor, I had spent 2 years in cybersecurity. 5 years ago, when my parents wanted to upgrade their home security system, they had asked me to do it to save money. I had installed the cameras, the smart locks, and the internal server, and because I knew my parents were technologically illiterate, I had created a permanent administrative backdoor for remote maintenance. I typed in the command line sequence. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I bypassed the firewall in less than 30 seconds. A moment later, a grid of 12 live video feeds popped up on my screen. I had eyes on the kitchen, the living room, the hallways, and even the backyard patio. I could see the aftermath of the dinner party. The maids were cleaning the dining room wearing masks. My father was likely upstairs in the shower trying to scrub away his humiliation. But more importantly, I had access to the audio. I unmuted the feed from the living room. My mother and Brittany were sitting there. Brittany was scrolling on her phone looking bored, while my mother paced back and forth holding a glass of wine. "I cannot believe he did that," Patricia was ranting. "He ruined everything. Now we cannot ask her for the house tonight." Brittany sighed loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "Just forge her signature, Mom. You have done it before on the insurance forms. Who is going to check?" I froze. I hit the record button immediately. I turned to Liam, who was watching the screen with a mixture of shock and admiration. "I do not just have a shield anymore," I said, pointing at the screen. "I have a sword. I'm going to let this recording run 24/7. Every lie they tell, every scheme they hatch, and every crime they confess to in the privacy of their own home is now going straight to my hard drive." I leaned back in my chair, watching my family on the screen. They thought they were safe behind their brick walls and iron gates. They had no idea that the daughter they treated like a ghost was now haunting the very wires of their house. The hunter had officially become the prey. Monday morning brought the sound of sirens to the family construction firm. I stood in my office watching the local news feed on the wall-mounted monitor. The camera zoomed in on agents wearing blue windbreakers emblazoned with the letters SEC, carrying boxes of files out of the building where my father had played king for 30 years. The headlines were brutal. "Local construction tycoon under investigation for pension fund fraud." I took a sip of my green tea. I had warned him. "I suggest you focus on solutions. Lawyers are expensive, and right now you do not have a dime." There was a silence on the other end. Then a shift occurred. The panic turned into a frantic, scheming energy. "You are right," she muttered. "We need money. We need cash flow immediately." Brittany. "What about Brittany?" I asked, though I knew exactly where her mind was going. "She needs to marry Jamal now," Patricia said, her voice rising with manic determination. "We cannot wait for the summer wedding. We need access to his accounts. I am going to tell her to fake a medical emergency with the baby. We will tell Jamal that for insurance reasons, they need to be legally married today. He is a good man. He will not let his child be born out of wedlock." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. They were willing to trap Jamal into a marriage just to use his bank account as a legal defense fund. They were going to sell their daughter to save their own skins. "Good luck with that, Mother," I said. "But be careful. Jamal is a smart man. If you push him too hard, he might start asking questions you cannot answer." I hung up and immediately dialed Liam. The timeline had accelerated. My parents were desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. They were about to push Brittany into the endgame, and I needed to make sure Jamal saw the trap before he walked into it. The gender reveal party was scheduled for tomorrow. It was going to be the perfect stage for the final act. The gender reveal party was not a celebration of life. It was a desperate fundraising event disguised as a family gathering. My parents had rented a sprawling estate overlooking the Charles River, using one of the few credit cards that had not yet been declined. The lawn was a sea of pastel pink and powder blue hydrangeas. There was a jazz quartet playing soft music and a catering team circulating with trays of caviar and champagne. But the real audience for this spectacle was not the family. It was the group of men in bespoke suits standing near the bar. They were Jamal's angel investors and board members. My mother, Patricia, knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that Jamal could not back out of the wedding if his key business partners believed he was about to become a father. She was trapping him with social pressure. Brittany stood in the center of it all, wearing a form-fitting white dress that accented the slight curve of her stomach. It was a masterclass in deception. I knew for a fact she had purchased the high-grade silicone prosthetic online. It was the kind used in Hollywood movies, designed to look and move like real skin. She rested her hand on it protectively every time a camera pointed in her direction, smiling the beatific smile of an expectant mother. I watched her from the edge of the patio. It was terrifying how easily she lied. She was glowing not from pregnancy hormones, but from the thrill of the con. Jamal stood beside her, looking like a man marching to the gallows. He was shaking hands and accepting congratulations, but his smile never reached his eyes. He was trapped. If he caused a scene now, if he questioned the pregnancy, in front of the men who funded his company, his stock price would tank. He had to play the role of the happy father until he had concrete proof. I tightened my grip on the gift box in my hand. Liam stood beside me, adjusting his tie. "Are you sure about this, Audrey?" he asked quietly. "Once we do this, there is no going back. This will destroy her reputation permanently." I looked at my parents, who were currently laughing with a venture capitalist, likely trying to secure a loan under the guise of casual conversation. They had tried to poison my husband. They had stolen my inheritance. They had slandered my name. "I am sure," I replied. "They chose this stage, Liam. I am just providing the grand finale." My mother spotted us. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she rushed over. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "I am surprised you came," she hissed through her teeth, keeping her voice low so the guests would not hear. "Do not ruin this, Audrey. We need this to go perfectly. If you say one word about the SEC investigation or the accounts being frozen, I swear I will make your life a living hell." I smiled at her. It was the same cold smile I had given her at the police station. "Relax, Mother," I said, pulling my arm free. "I am just here to give my sister a gift. I think she is going to find it very revealing." The jazz quartet faded into a confused silence as I stepped onto the small raised platform that had been set up for the gender reveal announcement. The microphone was heavy in my hand. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother, Patricia, start to move toward me, her face a mask of panic, but Jamal held up a hand to stop her. He wanted to hear what I had to say. He was desperate for a sign that this family was not completely broken. I know we have had our differences recently. I began, my voice projecting clearly across the manicured lawn. I looked directly at Brittany, who was clutching her stomach with both hands. But a baby changes everything. A new life deserves the best possible start, and as an aunt, I want to ensure that my niece or nephew is protected no matter what happens to the family finances. I signaled to Liam, who stepped forward, handing me a thick leather-bound portfolio. The gold lettering on the cover caught the afternoon sun. The guests murmured in appreciation. They thought it was a savings bond or a college fund. "This is a Platinum Shield health insurance policy," I announced, opening the folder. "It is fully paid for. It covers every medical expense from birth until the age of 18 up to $1 million. Private rooms, top surgeons, and experimental treatments. It ensures that this child will never have to worry about healthcare costs." Brittany's eyes lit up. For a moment she forgot her role. She saw dollar signs. She saw $1 million policy that she could perhaps cash out or borrow against. She took a step forward, her greed overpowering her caution. "Oh, Audrey," she gushed, reaching for the microphone. "That is so generous. Thank you." I pulled the folder back slightly out of her reach. I smiled. A cold, sharp smile. "There is just one small condition to activate the policy," I said. My voice dropped an octave, becoming deadly serious. "Because of the high value of the coverage, the underwriter requires immediate verification of the fetal heartbeat and developmental stage. They need to confirm the pregnancy is viable and low risk before the signature ink dries." Brittany froze. Her hand hovered in midair. "What?" she stammered. "What do you mean verification?" I pointed toward the driveway. There was at least 5 feet of empty space between us, a physical gap that was impossible to bridge without movement. Suddenly, Brittany lurched. She did not trip over a root or a wire. She simply threw herself backward with the dramatic flair of a soap opera actress. She flung her arms out and collapsed onto the soft manicured grass, landing hard on her side. A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. Before she even stopped rolling, Brittany was screaming. "My baby!" she shrieked, clutching her stomach with both hands. "My baby! Oh God, it hurts." She looked up at me, her face twisted into a mask of agony, and pointed a trembling finger. She pushed me. Audrey pushed me. I felt her shove me. The accusation hung in the air for a split second before pandemonium broke out. My mother, Patricia, did not miss a beat. She saw the lifeline Brittany had thrown, and she grabbed it with both hands. She rushed forward, falling to her knees beside her daughter. One of Jamal's business partners, a man in a gray suit, stepped toward me, his lip curling in disgust. "You are sick," he spat. "I hope you rot in prison for this." I did not defend myself. I did not scream back. I simply watched Brittany thrashing on the grass, putting on the performance of a lifetime. She was sobbing hysterically, burying her face in the grass to hide the fact that there were no physical tears, only noise. She thought she had won. She thought this chaos would force everyone to leave, allowing her to escape the ultrasound and later claim a tragic miscarriage caused by my assault. But she had forgotten one thing. I had brought a medical professional. And Dr. Evans was not watching the drama. He was watching the patient. He walked calmly toward the screaming woman, his medical bag in hand. "Let me through," Dr. Evans said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I am a doctor. If she is losing the baby, I need to examine her right now. Stand back, doctor," Evans commanded, pushing his way through the circle of horrified onlookers. He did not wait for permission. He dropped his medical bag onto the grass and knelt beside my screaming sister. "No," Brittany shrieked, kicking her legs wildly. "Do not touch me. I just want my husband. Get away from me." She was fighting him with a strength that was uncharacteristic for a woman who claimed to be having a miscarriage. Jamal was trying to restrain her, his face wet with tears. "Brittany, baby, please let him help you," Jamal begged, his voice cracking. "He needs to stop the bleeding. You are going to be okay." "I do not want him," she yelled, her eyes wild with panic. She grabbed the hem of her dress, pulling it down, trying to cover her stomach. She knew that the moment a medical professional touched her, the charade would be over. Dr. Evans was a professional who had worked in emergency rooms for 20 years. He did not have time for hysteria. He pinned her wrists with one hand and looked at Jamal. "Hold her legs," he ordered. "I need to assess the trauma to the abdomen immediately." Jamal obeyed, pinning Brittany's ankles to the ground. She let out a guttural scream that sounded less like pain and more like rage. "No, no, no!" Dr. Evans reached for the waist of her white dress. He expected to see blood. He expected to see bruising. He lifted the fabric, expecting to handle a tragedy. Instead, the entire garden went silent. There was no blood. There was no bruised skin. There was a peach-colored strap. The fall had dislodged the high-quality silicone prosthetic. It had shifted 3 inches to the left, revealing the pale, flat skin of Brittany's actual stomach underneath. The foam edges of the fake belly were visible, peeking out from under the expensive fabric like a cheap costume gone wrong. Dr. Evans paused. He looked at the plastic stomach. Then he looked at Brittany, who had suddenly stopped screaming. She lay there panting, her eyes squeezed shut, praying that if she did not look, it was not happening. The doctor stood up slowly. He wiped his hands on a sanitizing wipe, not because there was blood, but because he felt dirty being part of such a manipulation. He looked at the crowd who were leaning in, trying to understand what they were seeing. Then he looked directly at Jamal. "You can cancel the ambulance." "Mr. Jamal," Dr. Evans announced, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden stillness. "There is no need for emergency services." Jamal looked up confused. "Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" Dr. Evans reached down, and with a quick clinical motion, he yanked the prosthetic fully out from under Brittany's dress. He held up the rubber mound in the air. It wobbled ridiculously in the sunlight. "There is no baby," Dr. Evans said, throwing the silicone prop onto the grass next to Brittany's head. "And there never was. She is not injured. She is just wearing a pillow." I walked over to the laptop connected to the massive outdoor screen that was supposed to display pink or blue confetti. I tapped the keyboard, bypassing the slideshow of happy couple photos. "I think you should hear the rest of the conversation, Jamal," I said, my voice soft but firm. The screen flickered to life. It was the high-definition footage from my parents' living room, recorded just 3 days ago. The audio boomed across the lawn, echoing off the expensive landscaping. Brittany was lounging on the sofa, holding a glass of wine, looking bored. The timestamp in the corner proved this was recent. "I do not know how much longer I can keep this up, Mom," Brittany said on the screen, rolling her eyes. "He is so clingy. He always wants to touch me. It makes my skin crawl." My mother's voice answered from off-screen. "Just stick to the plan, honey. Once you are married and have the baby, you lock down the assets. Then you can live wherever you want. You just need to endure it for a year." Brittany laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "I am not having his baby, Mom. Do you really think I want a mixed-race child? I can barely stand looking at him as it is. I just need the ring. That black guy is so stupid he will believe anything I say. I will take half his fortune in the divorce, and then I never have to see his dark skin again." The video ended. The silence that followed was different than before. Before it was shock. Now it was horror. Brittany lay on the grass, paralyzed. She knew there was no coming back from this. She could fake a pregnancy. She could lie about a necklace. But she had just been exposed as a racist in front of Jamal's entire board of directors, many of whom were men of color. The investors were already turning away, their faces twisted in disgust. Jamal slowly raised his head. He looked at the screen where the video had paused on Brittany's sneering face. Then he looked down at the woman lying at his feet. The sadness in his eyes was gone. "You know I love you. I would never say those things." Jamal did not flinch. He did not pull away. He simply reached out and grabbed her left hand. His grip was not gentle. He held her wrist with the crushing force of a man who realized he had almost signed his life away to a monster. "Don't lie to me," Jamal said, his voice low and vibrating with intensity. "I can forgive debt. I can even forgive the fake pregnancy. But I will not forgive hate. I listened to you talk about my skin color like it was a disease. I listened to you call me stupid. He looked at the diamond ring on her finger. It was a 5-carat cushion-cut diamond he had custom designed, a symbol of a promise he now regretted with every fiber of his being. That ring belongs to a woman who loves me, he said, not a racist con artist who wants to rob me. He did not ask for it back. He yanked it off. Brittany shrieked as the metal slid over her knuckle, scratching her skin. It was a violent, definitive action. He turned his back on them, walking toward his security detail. "Escort them out," he ordered, "and make sure they don't steal the silverware on their way to the exit." I watched from the stage as my family crumbled. They stood there exposed and reviled, stripped of their lies and their dignity. My father looked old and defeated, my mother looked frantic, and Brittany looked at me with a hatred that could burn down cities. But I didn't flinch. I just smiled and raised my glass in a silent toast. Checkmate. Chào bạn đã nu bạch thang đây. Tôi đã hoàn thành đoạn 25 khoảng 500 từ. Đây là đòn chi mạng cuối cùng về mặt tài sản. Nếu đoạn trước tước đi danh dự và hôn nhân của Brittany, thì đoạn này tước đi token an toàn cuối cùng của họ ngôi nhà. Come on, honey. Let us go home. You need to rest in your own bed. I cleared my throat. It was a small sound, but it stopped them in their tracks. Actually, Mother, I said, pulling a thick blue legal document from my bag, you are not going home, because that house does not belong to you anymore. My father looked up, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? I have lived in that house for 30 years. My father left it to me. He left it to you in a living trust, Richard. I corrected him. I held up the document. Grandfather Rosemont was a very specific man. He hated laziness and he hated waste. He knew you were terrible with money, which is why he never gave you the deed. He kept the house in the trust with a specific trigger clause for the transfer of ownership. I flipped to page 42. The paper rustled in the wind. Clause 7b states that the Rosemont estate shall transfer in full ownership to the first grandchild who achieves 2 things. First, they must obtain a postgraduate degree or professional licensure. Second, they must enter into a legal marriage. I looked at Brittany, who was a college dropout, with a fake pregnancy and a failed engagement. Then I looked at myself. I have my CPA license and a master's degree in forensic accounting, I said. And as of 2:30 this afternoon, I am a married woman. My mother's face went slack. No, she whispered. That is impossible. Daddy would not do that. He did, I said, closing the folder. The moment I signed my marriage license, the trust dissolved and the deed transferred to my name. You have been living in my house as guests of the trust, but now I am the owner, and I have very different rules for my guests. I watched the realization wash over them. They were not just broke, they were homeless. The mansion they had used to intimidate me, the roof they had threatened to throw me under, was now mine. I pulled 3 envelopes from my blazer pocket. I suggest you start looking for apartments that accept tenants with bad credit and criminal records. I turned on my heel and walked back toward the car where Liam was waiting. I did not look back. I did not feel guilty. For the first time in 34 years, I was not the one being left out in the cold. I was the one holding the keys. The heavy thud of the car door closing sealed out the noise of the evening wind, but through the tinted glass of the Range Rover, I could still see the explosion happening on the sidewalk. I did not drive away immediately. I watched. It was the final autopsy of a family that had been dead for years. Brittany was the first to shatter. She threw the cream-colored envelope onto the pavement and turned on my mother with the ferocity of a cornered animal. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, ugly hatred. She was screaming so loud that I could hear her muffled voice even through the insulated glass. "This is your fault!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Patricia. "You told me to do it. You told me to fake the pregnancy. You said he was stupid. You said it would be easy money. I never wanted to wear that stupid pillow. You made me." My mother, Patricia, who had spent her entire life controlling the narrative, recoiled as if she had been slapped. She did not offer comfort. She offered venom. Do not you dare blame me! Patricia screamed back, her composure completely gone. I gave you the perfect plan. All you had to do was keep your mouth shut and play the part. But you were too sloppy. You got drunk. You talked to the cameras. You are the one who ruined us, Brittany. You are a failure. Richard stepped between them, but he was not playing the peacemaker. He was a man who had just realized he was going to spend his retirement in a federal prison cell. He grabbed Brittany by the shoulders, shaking her violently. I stole from my own company for you, he roared. Neither happened. The deputies did not knock politely. They pounded on the heavy oak door with the authority of the law. When my father Richard finally opened it, he was still wearing his silk dressing gown, looking bewildered as if he could not comprehend that consequences actually applied to him. Two movers hired by the state marched past him, carrying large plastic bins. The sheriff held up a clipboard. You have 1 hour to remove personal clothing and toiletries, he announced. Furniture, artwork, electronics, and jewelry are to remain on the premises as per the court order. Anything removed that is not on the approved list will be considered theft. I watched as my mother Patricia tried to walk out with a silver candelabra stuffed into her tote bag. A deputy stopped her gently but firmly, removing the antique from her grip. That stays, ma'am, he said, placing it back on the foyer table. But the most pathetic sight was Brittany. She was sitting on the front steps holding her phone up in a shaky selfie angle. Even now, as her life collapsed, she was trying to spin the narrative. She was live streaming to her remaining followers, hoping to weaponize her tears one last time. Guys, please help me, she sobbed into the camera. My sister is literally throwing us onto the street. We have nowhere to go. She is a monster. Please send donations to the link in my bio. We are victims of a cruel legal system. She was expecting sympathy. She was expecting the heart emojis and the offers of support she used to get. But she had forgotten that the internet is written in ink. The video of her racist tirade against Jamal had gone viral globally. She was not the victim anymore. She was the villain. I pulled up her stream on my own phone. The comments were scrolling faster than she could read them. There were no hearts. There were only clown emojis and angry faces. Pay your debts, you racist fraud, one user wrote. You deserve this for what you said about Jamal, another commented. Get a job and stop scamming people. Brittany read the comments, her face crumbling. She saw the world turning on her in real time. There was no army of defenders. There was only a mob of critics who saw right through her crocodile tears. She screamed in frustration and threw her phone onto the grass. It cracked on impact, cutting off the feed and silencing her only remaining audience. The sheriff stepped out onto the porch. Time is up, folks, he said. He ushered them down the steps. My father carrying a single suitcase, my mother clutching her fur coat, and Brittany with nothing but her shattered phone. The locksmith stepped forward. He changed the locks in less than 5 minutes. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the loudest sound in the neighborhood. It was the sound of a chapter ending. The sheriff placed a neon orange notice on the door. Evicted. They stood on the curb, a pile of expensive luggage surrounding them, looking at the house that was no longer theirs. They were finally exactly who they were always terrified of becoming. Nobody. The first thing to go was the 6-foot oil painting of my father that hung in the foyer. It depicted him as a captain of industry, standing with his hand on a globe. But I knew the truth. He was just a man who stole from his employees to fund his ego. I did not sell it. I did not donate it. I watched the contractors carry it out to the industrial dumpster in the driveway, and the sound of the gilded frame cracking against the metal side was the sweetest music I had heard in years. I spent the next 3 weeks exercising the house. I hired a team of restoration experts not to modernize the estate, but to strip away the layers of tackiness my parents had added over the years. We tore down the heavy, suffocating velvet drapes my mother used to block out the sun. We ripped up the cheap beige carpeting that hid the original hardwood floors my grandfather had installed in the 1920s. With every layer we peeled back, the house seemed to breathe a little deeper. The smell of stale gin and desperation was replaced by the scent of sawdust and fresh white paint. I was not just renovating a building. I was reclaiming my history. I was scrubbing the DNA of their toxicity out of the very walls. Liam was with me every step of the way. He took a leave of absence from the hospital to help me. He did not hire people to do the hard work, he did it himself. I watched him in the evenings covered in plaster dust, sanding down the banister of the grand staircase. He wasn't trying to change the house to fit him. He was helping me uncover the home that had been stolen from me. One evening we sat on the floor of the newly finished living room, eating takeout noodles from cartons. The room was empty of furniture, but it felt full for the first time. I closed my eyes, listening to the silence. It was not the heavy, oppressive silence of secrets that used to hang over this house. It was a clean, expectant silence. It was the sound of a blank page waiting to be written. The war was over. The enemy had been defeated. And for the first time in my life, I was finally home. The fall from grace was not a slow decline. It was a vertical drop. 6 months after the eviction, the final gavel struck in the federal courthouse. My father Richard stood before the judge, a woman who had no patience for white-collar criminals, who destroyed the livelihoods of working-class families. He was sentenced to 8 years in a minimum security facility for wire fraud and pension embezzlement. He tried to cry during his final statement, hoping for leniency, but the courtroom remained dry-eyed. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, his expensive Italian suit looked ridiculously out of place. He was no longer a CEO, he was inmate 7429. On the south side of the city, far away from the manicured lawns and gated communities of their past life, my mother and sister were discovering the harsh reality of the economy they had ignored for so long. They shared a cramped studio apartment above a 24-hour laundromat. The walls were paper-thin, vibrating with the sound of spinning washing machines day and night. The air always smelled of industrial detergent and stale grease. There were no more maids. There were no more brunches. There was only the relentless grind of survival. Brittany stood behind the counter of a fast food franchise wearing a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. The grease from the fry station had ruined her manicure weeks ago, and her hair was pulled back into a messy bun under a visor. She looked at the line of customers. They were not investors or socialites. They were tired, hungry people who did not care about her follower count or her past life. "Order number 42. She yelled, her voice flat and defeated. A teenager stepped forward, grabbing the bag without saying thank you. Brittany watched him go, feeling a flash of the old entitlement rise up in her throat, but she swallowed it down. 6 months ago, she would have had him thrown out for looking at her the wrong way. Now she had to smile and ask if he wanted ketchup. In the back of the kitchen, my mother Patricia was scraping gum off the underside of a plastic table. Her vintage Chanel suits were long gone, sold to a consignment shop to pay the security deposit on the apartment. She wore the same bright orange uniform as her daughter. Her hands, once soft and adorned with diamonds, were now chapped red and smelling of bleach. She looked over at Brittany, who was leaning against the soda machine, trying to check her phone during a lull in the rush. "Get back to work, Brittany," Patricia hissed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "The manager is watching. We cannot afford to lose this shift. Rent is due tomorrow, and we are still short." Brittany snapped her head around. "Do not tell me what to do. This is your fault. I should be in Paris right now. I should be a billionaire's wife. Instead, I serve fries to people I hate." Patricia did not argue. She did not have the energy left to fight. She just looked down at the dirty floor and scrubbed harder, trying to clean a stain that would never come out. They were trapped in a hell of their own making, bound together not by love, but by the shared misery of knowing they had held the world in their hands and threw it all away for greed. The peace of my Saturday morning was shattered by the harsh buzz of the service gate intercom. I was in the sunroom reviewing a manuscript, but the persistent noise forced me to walk to the wall-mounted monitor. The camera feed showed a woman standing in the pouring rain, clutching a plastic bag over her head. It took me a moment to recognize her. The fur coats and salon blowouts were gone, replaced by a thin windbreaker and hair that hung in wet strings around a face devoid of makeup. It was my mother, Patricia. I pressed the talk button. "What do you want, Mother?" "Audrey, please," she sobbed, her voice cracking through the speaker. "You have to let me in. I am sick. I am so sick. I went to the free clinic, but they said I need a specialist. It is my heart, Audrey. I need $5,000 for the tests, or they say I might not make it through the month." She looked pathetic, shivering against the iron bars. A year ago, I would have opened the gate. A year ago, the guilt would have eaten me alive. But today, I felt nothing but a cold, clinical detachment. I looked at her weeping face, and I did not see a dying woman. I saw a pattern. My mind flashed back to my wedding day 3 months ago. I was in the bridal suite having my veil adjusted. My phone had buzzed on the vanity table. It was a text from my mother. It was just one word in all capital letters. Urgent. Followed by a second message. "I am at the hospital. Heavy chest pains. Do not get married without me. Come now." I had almost run out. I had almost left Liam at the altar. But Liam had grabbed my hand and told me to call the hospital first. There was no record of her admission. She was not dying. She was sitting in her car in the church parking lot, hoping to cause enough chaos to stop the wedding. When she realized I wasn't coming, she walked into the ceremony 10 minutes late, looking perfectly healthy and angry that her drama had failed. I looked back at the monitor. The rain was coming down harder now. "I am not opening the gate, Mother," I said into the intercom. "But I am dying," she shrieked, dropping the weak act instantly. "How can you be so cruel? I gave you life. You are letting your own mother rot in the street while you sit in my mansion." "It is not your mansion," I corrected her. "And if you are truly sick, you can go to the emergency room. By law, they have to treat you regardless of your ability to pay. But you do not want treatment, do you? You want cash. You want money to get Brittany out of that apartment or to buy a lottery ticket to try and win your life back." "I am not lying," she screamed, rattling the gate. "I have the papers. Hold them up to the camera," I said. She froze. She fumbled with her bag, but she did not pull out any medical forms. She pulled out a tissue and wiped her nose, her eyes darting side to side. She had no papers. There was no heart condition. There was only the cancer of her own narcissism. "Go home, Patricia," I said. "Do not come back here. If you ring this bell again, I will call the police for harassment, and this time I will press charges." I cut the feed. The screen went black. I stood there for a moment listening to the silence of the house. I did not feel guilty. I felt the immense relief of a person who finally understood that you cannot save someone who is determined to drown you with them. I walked back to the sunroom and picked up my tea. It was still warm. I pressed the talk button one last time, reawakening the connection to the gate. The monitor flickered back to life, showing my mother, Patricia, standing in the pouring rain. She looked up at the camera lens, her eyes lighting up with a desperate hope. She thought she had won. She thought her tears had cracked my resolve and that I was coming out with a checkbook. "I am not opening the gate, Patricia," I said, my voice steady and metallic through the speaker. "And I am not giving you $5,000 cash." Her face fell, instantly crumbling from hope back into anger. "But I am your mother," she shrieked. "You would let me die over money." I ignored her histrionics. "I am not letting you die. I am removing your excuse. I anticipated that you would eventually use your health as a bargaining chip. I know you too well, so yesterday I contacted the State Health Exchange." Patricia froze, the rain dripping off her nose. "What are you talking about?" "I have prepaid a premium bronze-level health insurance policy in your name for exactly 1 year," I explained. "It is fully active as of this morning. The coverage is comprehensive for emergencies and general practitioners. It does not cover private rooms. It does not cover cosmetic procedures, and it certainly does not have a cash value that you can liquidate." I paused to let the information sink in. She was not getting money to gamble. She was not getting money to pay Brittany's rent. She was getting exactly what she claimed to need, and she hated it. "The insurance card is in the external mailbox attached to the brick pillar," I continued. "Take it. It is the last thing I will ever give you." I watched on the screen as she scrambled to the mailbox. She ripped it open and pulled out the white envelope. She tore it open, hoping to find a check hidden inside, but there was only a plastic ID card. She stared at it with pure disdain. "I cannot pay rent with an insurance card," she screamed, shaking the plastic at the camera. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "I need cash, Audrey. I need actual money." Her reaction confirmed everything. The chest pains were a lie. The emergency was a fabrication. A truly sick woman would have been relieved to have coverage. A con artist is only disappointed when the mark pays the bill instead of handing over the wallet. "That is your problem now," I said. "You claimed you were sick. I have provided a doctor. My conscience is clear. That card represents the absolute limit of my obligation to you. Do not ring this bell again. Do not send letters. Do not try to contact Liam. If you step foot on this property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing." I did not wait for her response. I did not want to hear her curses or her pleas. I reached out and severed the connection, permanently disabling the intercom at the gate. The screen went black. I walked away from the wall. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not guilt, and it was not sadness. It was the feeling of a heavy tether finally snapping. I had paid my dues. I had survived their abuse. And now, with that final piece of plastic, I had bought my freedom. I walked back into the sunroom, where the morning light was flooding in warm and bright. I picked up my tea and took a sip. It tasted perfect. The garden was unrecognizable from the battlefield it had been a year ago. The spot where Brittany had thrown her silicone belly onto the grass in a fit of staged hysteria was now covered by a trellis of blooming white jasmine. The air did not smell of desperation and deceit anymore. It smelled of vanilla cake and fresh rain. Liam and I had technically been married for 12 months, ever since the day we signed the papers at the courthouse to secure the trust. But today was not about legalities. It was about reclaiming the space. We were filling the Rosemont estate with the kind of laughter my grandfather had always intended for it. I stood by the restored marble fountain, wearing a simple silk gown that cost a fraction of what my mother used to spend on a single lunch. Liam was at my side, his hand resting comfortably on the small of my back. We were watching our friends, mostly doctors and colleagues from my firm, dancing under the string lights. There were no social climbers, there were no paparazzi, just people who actually liked us. A stir at the garden gate caught my attention. Jamal walked in. He looked like a different man. The tension that used to tighten his jaw was gone, replaced by a relaxed, easy confidence. He was not alone. Walking beside him was a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a confident stride. She wore a navy blazer over her dress, and she did not cling to him like a prop. She held her own space. Audrey, Jamal said, approaching us with a genuine smile. "You look incredible." He shook Liam's hand firmly. "Thank you for inviting us. I want you to meet Elena. She is a constitutional lawyer. We met at a legal conference." Elena extended her hand. Her grip was firm. "I have heard so much about you, Audrey. Jamal speaks of you with the kind of reverence usually reserved for war heroes. I audited his company's legal compliance last month. Cleanest books I have ever seen, thanks to your firm." I smiled. I liked her immediately. She was the anti-Brittany. She dealt in facts, laws, and reality. She was exactly the kind of partner Jamal deserved. While Elena and Liam fell into a deep discussion about a recent Supreme Court ruling, Jamal pulled me aside slightly. He looked out at the garden, his eyes lingering on the giant screen where I had once played the incriminating video. "It is hard to believe this is the same place," he said quietly. "It isn't," I replied, taking a sip of champagne. "We dug up the rot, Jamal. We planted new roots." He turned to me, his expression serious. "I owe you my life, Audrey. Not just my bank account. You saved me from a lifetime of gaslighting. When I think about what would have happened if you hadn't exposed her, I would be raising a non-existent child in a house built on lies. You gave me the brutal truth when everyone else was selling me a fantasy." I looked at him. I did not do it for gratitude, Jamal. I did it because the math did not add up. And as you know, I hate bad math. He laughed, a genuine sound that mixed with the jazz music playing softly in the background. He looked over at Elena, who was laughing at something Liam said. She knows everything, Jamal said. I told her the whole story on our second date. She didn't care about the money. She just asked if I was okay. That is when I knew she was real. I raised my glass to him. To reality, Jamal. It is the only asset that appreciates over time. He clinked his glass against mine. To reality. I watched him walk back to his partner, seeing the balance in their step. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the estate. The nightmare was over. The ledger was balanced. And for the first time in my life, every single thing in my world was exactly where it was supposed to be. The last guests were drifting away, their laughter fading into the soft hum of the crickets in the garden. Liam was inside, turning off the lights in the grand hallway. I stood alone on the stone terrace, looking out over the property that was finally quiet. The moonlight reflected off the glass of wine in my hand, turning the dark red liquid into a mirror. I turned slowly until I was looking directly at you. Not past you. At you. You might be wondering if I miss them. You might be wondering if on a day like this, when I pledged my life to a man who truly sees me, I felt a pang of sadness that my mother, my father, and my sister were not here to witness it. I took a sip of the wine. It was rich and complex, like the life I had fought so hard to secure. The answer is no. Their absence today was not a tragedy. It was my wedding gift to myself. For 30 years, I thought their approval was the currency I needed to survive. I thought if I just worked harder, if I was just smarter, if I just gave them enough money, they would finally love me. But that is the thing about a black hole. It does not care how much light you feed it. It will always be hungry, and it will eventually consume you if you stand too close. I looked back at the house. The warm yellow light spilling from the windows was no longer a prison. It was a sanctuary. I recovered the Rosemont sapphire. It is locked in a vault where it belongs. I recovered this estate. It is filled with people who know the meaning of loyalty. But the most valuable asset I recovered was not made of diamonds or brick. It was my own timeline. I took back the years I would have wasted trying to fix people who did not want to be fixed. People tell you that family is everything. They tell you that blood is thicker than water. They use that phrase as a weapon to keep you in line. They want you to believe that you owe your abusers a seat at your table simply because you share a last name. That is a lie. Toxicity does not care about DNA. A malignant tumor shares your genetic code too. It grows from your own cells. It feeds on your own blood. But you do not keep it. You do not nurture it. You cut it out. You excise it surgically and completely so that the healthy part of you can survive. I did not destroy my family. I simply let them face the consequences of their own actions. I stopped being their shield and allowed reality to be their sword. They are out there somewhere living the life they earned, and I am here living the life I built. I raised the crystal glass. The light caught the rim, creating a perfect circle. There is no need for anger anymore. There is no need for noise. The audit is complete. The accounts are balanced. And the profit is peace. The best revenge is not screaming. It is not fighting. It is just living. Truly, deeply, and unapologetically living. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. Cheers to the bad guys. Thank you for leaving. I took one last sip as the screen faded to black. The story of Audrey is a brutal but necessary reminder that family is a title that must be earned through behavior, not a free pass granted by DNA. We are often culturally conditioned to believe that we owe our blood relatives unconditional loyalty, forgiveness, and financial support, regardless of how toxic they become. Audrey's journey dismantles this dangerous myth. She spent years trying to purchase her family's affection with her silence and her success. only to realize that to a narcissist, a giver is nothing more than a resource to be depleted until it is dry. The core lesson here is that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty. It is a fundamental act of self-preservation. When you tolerate disrespect to keep the peace, you are effectively waging a war against your own self-worth. Audrey did not find happiness by fixing her broken family. She found it by accepting that they were broken and refusing to let their sharp edges cut her anymore. She realized that you cannot save people who are determined to drown, and if you hold on to them, they will simply pull you under with them. Furthermore, this narrative highlights the critical power of financial independence and documentation. In a world of gaslighting and emotional manipulation, facts are your best defense. Audrey used her professional skills collecting evidence, understanding the law, and securing her assets to turn the tables. She proved that while emotions can be manipulated, the truth is a ledger that eventually balances out. The ultimate takeaway is that you have the absolute right to audit your life and cut out the liabilities, even if those liabilities share your last name. Your peace is more valuable than any family tradition. If you enjoyed watching Audrey serve cold hard justice to those who underestimated her, please like and subscribe for more stories where the underdog takes it all. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with a toxic family member? Share your experience in the comments below. I read every single one. Just the raw, honest promise between two people who chose each other when the world turned its back. As I slipped the gold band onto Liam's finger, I felt a surge of power. My family thought they could ruin this moment by their absence. Instead, they clarified it. They proved they did not belong here. They belonged at a party built on lies and stolen jewels. As soon as the ink dried on the marriage license, I did not head to a reception. I walked into the small vestry room and unzipped the $3,000 lace gown. It fell to the floor like a shed skin. I left it there in a pile of tulle and silk. In its place, I pulled on what I had originally packed for our honeymoon departure. It was a tailored white structural blazer with sharp lapels and matching wide-leg trousers. I slicked my hair back into a severe bun and applied a coat of dark red lipstick. I did not look like a jilted bride anymore. I looked like a forensic auditor preparing for a raid. It is my sad older sister. I guess no one showed up to her little ceremony, so she came here to crash my party. Did you come for the free cake, Audrey? Or did you just want to see what a real celebration looks like? Laughter erupted from the crowd. It was a cruel, jagged sound. My stomach turned, but my face remained like stone. I did not stop walking. I moved straight through the crowd, parting the sea of guests, who stared at me like I was a zoo animal. Before I could reach the stage, a hand clamped down on my arm with bruising force. It was my mother, Patricia. She had materialized out of the crowd, her face a mask of panic barely concealing her rage. She dragged me aside near a pillar away from the direct line of sight of the cameras. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed through her teeth, her voice low and venomous. "You look insane, Audrey. You are embarrassing us. Look at you showing up in a suit like some sort of man. Get out." He turned and walked out of the office, his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit suddenly looking too big for him. I watched the door close behind him. I let out a long breath I did not know I was holding. I walked back to my desk and picked up the phone. "Marcus, send the files to the FBI agent and get me a fresh coffee. I have a feeling this is going to be a very long day." 2 hours after my father fled my office, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I did not recognize. It was brief and to the point. "The Oak Room. 30 minutes. Come alone." It was signed Jamal. I knew the Oak Room. It was a private members-only club in Back Bay, known for its discretion and its single malt scotches. It was exactly the kind of place a man went when he needed to make a decision that would alter the trajectory of his life. I grabbed the beige file folder from my safe, the one labeled Brittany Personal Finance, and headed out into the bustling city streets. He was flipping through the pages faster now, his jaw tightening with every line item. He saw the unpaid Nordstrom bills, the collection's notices from luxury spas, the student loans she had deferred so many times the interest had doubled the principal even though she never finished her degree. She told me she was debt-free, Jamal whispered. She told me she invested her trust fund in stocks. There is no trust fund, Jamal, I said. My parents spent it years ago. The lifestyle she projects on Instagram is funded entirely by debt and by siphoning money from my father's company. If you marry her without a prenup in the state of Massachusetts, her debt becomes your problem. You are not just marrying a woman, you are marrying a $500,000 hole in the ground. Jamal closed the folder. He ran a hand over his face. He looked like a man who had just narrowly avoided stepping off a cliff. He was a self-made man who valued hard work and financial literacy above all else. I recognized the bottle from my father's medicine cabinet. It was a prescription-strength laxative powerful enough to clear out a horse. She stirred it vigorously into the thick soup, watching it disappear without a trace. She muttered to herself, unaware that she was being recorded for a future courtroom. Let us see how dignified the fancy doctor looks when he soils himself at the dinner table. She giggled. It was a sound of pure malice. She wanted to humiliate Liam. She wanted to prove that he was not perfect, that he was just a body that could be broken and embarrassed. She wanted to punish me by destroying the man who protected me. She wiped the rim of the bowl and turned to the oven to check the bread rolls. This was my window. I pushed the door open and walked in, making my footsteps intentionally loud. "Smells delicious, Mother," I said breezily, walking straight to the island. Patricia jumped, dropping the oven mitt. "Audrey, you startled me. Go sit down, I will bring these out." She looked from her husband to the empty soup bowl in front of him. Her face went white as she realized exactly what had happened. She looked at me in horror. Her mouth opened to accuse me, but she stopped. She knew she could not say a word without admitting she had tried to poison my husband. I calmly folded my linen napkin and placed it on the table next to the untouched bread roll. Liam stood up beside me, buttoning his jacket, his face perfectly composed, though I could see the amusement dancing in his eyes. "It seems like a stomach bug is going around," I said, my voice cool and steady, cutting through the cacophony of my father's groans and my sister's retching. "We should probably leave before we catch it. Get well soon, Dad." We walked out of the dining room, leaving the chaos behind us. As we stepped into the fresh autumn air, I heard my mother screaming for towels. I took Liam's hand, and for the first time in years, I felt a genuine sense of justice. They wanted a shit show. Shit. I simply gave them one. Back in the safety of our penthouse, I connected the Pearl button camera to my main server. The footage uploaded instantly. On the large monitor, the image of my mother pouring the laxative into the soup was crystal clear. It was not grainy or ambiguous. It was high-definition proof of intent to harm. Liam stood behind me, watching the screen, his jaw tight. "This is assault, Audrey," he said quietly. "If that had been anyone else, we would be calling the police right now." I shook my head. "Not yet. Police reports can be filed later. Right now, this video is insurance. If they try to sue me for the condo, or if they try to claim I am harassing them, I will release this footage to every charity board and social club my mother belongs to. It is mutually assured destruction." I encrypted the file and saved it to 3 separate secure cloud drives. But I was not done. The adrenaline from the dinner was still pumping through my veins and my mind was racing with possibilities. I had told him explicitly in this very office that if he threatened me, I would look into his finances. He chose to try and poison my husband instead. I simply forwarded the structured withdrawal patterns to the Securities and Exchange Commission via their anonymous whistleblower portal. The evidence was irrefutable. My phone rang. It was not my father. He was currently being questioned by federal agents. It was my mother, Patricia. "Audrey." She screamed the moment I picked up. Her voice was shrill with panic. The cards are not working. I am at the grocery store and the platinum card was declined. The teller said the accounts are frozen. How are we supposed to live? That is standard procedure during a federal investigation. Mother, I replied calmly. They freeze assets to prevent suspects from hiding money or fleeing the country. You might want to get used to coupons. You did this, she spat. I know you did this, you ungrateful witch. I ignored the insult. The heavy iron gates swung open and a sleek white Mercedes Sprinter van rolled onto the property. It was emblazoned with the logo of Boston Advanced Imaging. I knew how busy you were preparing for the wedding. I continued, keeping my eyes locked on hers. So I brought the hospital to you. That is Dr. Evans getting out of the van. He is the chief of obstetrics at Mass General. He has brought a portable 4D ultrasound machine. The crowd erupted in applause. The investors were nodding approvingly. To them, this was a wonderful gesture. A high-tech mobile checkup for a high-value baby. Jamal looked impressed. He turned to Brittany, beaming. Babe, this is amazing. We can see the baby right now. We can show everyone the heartbeat on the big screen. I watched the blood drain from Brittany's face. She was wearing a high-quality silicone prosthetic, but it was just rubber and foam. An ultrasound wand would not find a heartbeat. It would find nothing but plastic and deception, Dr. Evans walked up the grassy aisle wheeling a state-of-the-art machine. He smiled professionally. If the mother is ready, we can get a beautiful image in less than 2 minutes, he said. I held out the microphone to my sister. Well, Brittany, I said. The doctor is waiting. Why do not you lie down on the chaise lounge and show us this miracle baby? Unless, of course, there is a reason you cannot. The silence that hung over the garden was thick enough to choke on. Brittany looked from the ultrasound machine to me and then to the crowd of expectant faces. She was cornered. There was no way out. The logic of the situation dictated that she simply lie down and let the doctor prove her pregnancy, but Brittany did not operate on logic. She operated on survival instinct, and right now she was a cornered animal willing to chew off its own leg to escape a trap. She took a step backward, her eyes darting around frantically. I stood perfectly still, my hands clasped in front of me holding the microphone. You monster! My mother screamed, looking up at me with tears already streaming down her face. You killed him! You killed my grandson because you could not stand to see your sister happy. Murderer. The word rippled through the guests. Murderer. Jamal dropped to the ground beside Brittany, his face pale with terror. He was not thinking about the credit report or the stolen necklace. He was watching the woman he loved writhing in pain. Call 911, he shouted at the frozen crowd. Someone call an ambulance. No, Brittany wailed, gripping his shirt. It is too late. I can feel it. I am losing him. She pushed me, Jamal. She wants our baby dead. I looked around. The investors, the board members, and the socialites were staring at me with expressions of pure revulsion. They had not seen the gap between us. They had only seen the fall. In the chaos of the moment, the truth did not matter. The narrative had been set. I was the jealous, barren sister who had committed an act of violence. The only sound in the entire estate was the wind rustling through the hydrangeas. The investors looked at the fake belly on the grass, then at the woman lying next to it. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The crying, the fall, the accusation of murder. It was all a lie, a sick, twisted lie. Brittany opened her eyes. She saw Jamal staring down at her. His expression had shifted from concern to a look of absolute, unrecognizable emptiness. Jamal stared at the piece of silicone on the grass as if it were an alien object. He was trying to process the magnitude of the lie, but I knew his heart. He was a man who looked for the good in people. He was probably already telling himself that she did this because she loved him too much and was afraid to lose him. He was probably thinking he could forgive a desperate act of a woman who wanted a family. I could not let that happen. I had to show him that this was not a crime of passion. It was a business transaction rooted in hate. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. He finally saw her. He did not see his fiancée. He saw a stranger who despised his very existence. He took a step back, then another. He looked at his hands as if he wanted to wash them. He did not scream. He did not rage. He simply looked at her with the kind of indifference you give to a rotting piece of fruit. "You are dismissed, Brittany," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Get off my property." The video clip ended, leaving a static image of Brittany's sneering face on the giant screen, a permanent testament to her bigotry. Jamal stood motionless. The cold composure he had maintained throughout the afternoon finally cracked. It did not shatter into tears or screaming. It dissolved into a terrifying quiet rage that was far more dangerous. He looked down at Brittany, who was scrambling to her feet, wiping grass stains from her white dress. She reached for him, her hand trembling. "Jamal, wait," she pleaded. "That video is fake. Audrey edited it." Jamal held the ring up, looking at it with disgust before shoving it into his pocket. "Jamal, please, my mother," Patricia cried, rushing forward, trying to salvage the wreckage. "We can explain. She was just venting. She was stressed." Jamal turned on her. His eyes were burning. He looked from Patricia to Richard, and finally back to Brittany. He saw them for what they were, a pack of wolves in designer clothing. "Get out!" he commanded. His voice boomed across the silent lawn, startling the remaining guests. "Get off my property, all of you. If you are not gone in 5 minutes, I will have my security team remove you like the trespassers you are." "But where will we go?" Brittany sobbed, looking around at the investors who were now openly filming her humiliation. "We gave up our apartment. We have nowhere to go." Jamal leaned in close, his face inches from hers. "I don't care. Go to a hotel. Go to a shelter. Go to hell for all I care. Just get out of my sight." Dưới đây là nội dung tiếng Anh được tối ưu cho giọng đọc AI, không ký từ là câu văn gãy gọn, ngữ khí lạnh lùng và quyền lực. The heavy iron gates of Jamal's estate slammed shut behind my family with a finality that echoed in the evening air. My father Richard looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. My mother Patricia was frantically trying to hail an Uber because their car was still parked at the valet stand inside, and the security team had refused to retrieve it. Brittany was sitting on the curb, still wearing the grass-stained white dress, sobbing into her hands. I walked over to them. Liam stood a few feet behind me, silent and watchful. "Well, this is a disaster," Patricia spat when she saw me. "I hope you are happy, Audrey. You ruined your sister's life. You ruined our financial future. But we will survive. We are going back to the mansion. We will regroup. We will sue Jamal for breach of promise." She reached for Brittany's arm. "So I suggest you find a hotel for tonight," I said, handing them the envelopes. "Because you are not sleeping in my house." My mother stared at the legal document in her trembling hands. She read the clause over and over again, hoping the words would change. She was looking for a loophole. She was looking for a mistake. But there were no mistakes. My grandfather was a ruthless businessman, and his lawyers were the best in Boston. The trust was ironclad. The moment the ink dried on my marriage certificate, the ownership of the Rosemont estate transferred instantly and irrevocably to me. "This cannot be real," Patricia whispered. Her voice was thin and reedy, stripped of its usual arrogance. "We are your parents, Audrey. You cannot just kick us out of our own home. We have nowhere else to go. The accounts are frozen. We have no cash." I reached into my bag and pulled out 3 thick cream-colored envelopes. They were heavy. Official. Technically, Mother, it is not your home anymore, I said, my voice devoid of pity. It is my asset. And you are correct, I cannot just kick you out. Massachusetts state law requires a formal process for removing unauthorized occupants. I handed an envelope to my father, one to my mother, and dropped the third one onto Brittany's lap. These are formal eviction notices, I explained. You have exactly 30 days to vacate the premises. The countdown starts the moment you touch that envelope. By noon on December 20th, I expect the house to be empty of all your personal belongings and the keys to be left on the kitchen counter. My father, Richard, ripped his envelope open. His face turned a dangerous shade of purple as he scanned the legal jargon. "This is insane," he sputtered. "You are evicting us. We are family. You are treating us like squatters." I took a step closer to him. "I am treating you like liabilities, Richard. You tried to poison my husband. You tried to steal my inheritance. You tried to ruin my reputation. Squatters would have treated me with more respect than you ever did." Brittany finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. "But what about my stuff?" she asked quietly. "My clothes. My furniture." I smiled. It was a cold, professional smile. "Anything you purchased with your own money, you are free to take. However, I have already had an independent appraiser inventory the entire estate. Anything that belongs to the trust, including the antique furniture, the art collection, and the silver remains in the house. If a single teaspoon goes missing, I will file theft charges. And unlike Jamal, I will not hesitate to prosecute." My mother let out a sob, clutching my father's arm. "Audrey, please, be reasonable. Where will we go?" I looked at the three of them huddled together on the sidewalk, cast out of the kingdom they thought they ruled. They looked small. They looked pathetic. "That sounds like a personal problem, Mother," I said. "I destroyed my legacy to pay your gambling debts. I risked everything because you promised me you would marry that tech billionaire and pay me back. You are a parasite, Brittany. You have sucked us dry." Brittany shoved him away. "I hate you!" she screamed. "I hate both of you! I wish I had never been born into this pathetic family." She collapsed onto the curb, burying her face in the expensive white dress that was now stained with grass and dirt. She looked like a broken doll discarded by a bored child. My parents did not kneel down to hold her. They stood over her, arguing with each other. Patricia was blaming Richard for the trust fund clause. Richard was blaming Patricia for raising a spoiled brat. They were eating each other alive. The unit was gone. The alliance was broken. There was no loyalty left, only the desperate scrambling of three people who had lost everything and had no one else to blame but the reflection in the mirror. Liam put the car in gear. "Are you ready to go?" he asked softly. I looked at them one last time. My father waving his arms, my mother clutching her chest, and my sister weeping in the gutter. They were alone with their consequences. "Drive," I said. As we pulled away, the image of them shrank in the side mirror until they were just small, dark specks in the distance. I did not feel sad. I did not feel angry. I felt light. The weight I had carried for 30 years was finally gone, left behind on a sidewalk in front of a house I now owned. The rearview mirror was clear, and the road ahead was wide open. The deadline arrived with the precision of a Swiss watch. At exactly 1200 hours, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department pulled into the driveway of the Rosemont estate. I sat in my car parked across the street, watching the final act of this tragedy unfold. My parents had not packed. They had spent the last 30 days in a state of delusion, believing that I would crack, or that a miracle would save them. The fireplace was crackling, casting a warm glow on the restored oak floors. "You know," Liam said, wiping a smudge of paint from my cheek, "you look different here. You do not look like a guest anymore. You look like the lady of the manor." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I feel different. For 30 years I walked on eggshells in this room. I was afraid to touch anything. I was afraid to speak too loud. Now I just feel peace." He kissed the top of my head. It is because the ghosts are gone, Audrey. You banished them. This is just wood and stone now, and it belongs to you. I looked around the vast empty space. I thought about the nursery upstairs that I was painting a soft sage green. I thought about the garden where I had already ordered the gardener to dig up my mother's hydrangeas and plant wild roses instead. I was building a sanctuary. We are going to fill this house with good things, I whispered. No more secrets. No more lies. Just us. Liam squeezed my hand. Just us.